Aloha and thank you for joining us once again. I'm Cunningham. We are back with a digital update on this Election Day 2024. Polls here in Hawaii are set to remain open until 7 o'clock tonight. Now, we saw earlier, if you're still in line, you will be allowed to vote no matter if you're 8th in line or 200th in line. It's another 3+ hours or so that it should be open. Of course, there is the presidential race that we are going to be touching on throughout the night, especially since polls across the country have closed or will be closing in the coming hours. Joining us live in studio is Dr. Jennifer Walsh. She is Provost and Senior Vice President of Strategic Initiatives and Chief Strategy Officer. This is at the Hawaii Pacific University. And Dr. Walsh, if you don't mind, let's dive right into the Electoral College because that's obviously going to be very important. We've seen national coverage as far as how this is going to play out. If we could take a look real quick at the Electoral College map. I know we've been sort of studying that, and you've been seeing as some of the states start to come in. Tell us what we're kind of seeing right here with just, again, early on results. I mean, we're still very early in the evening.
We are. So the states that have been called are ones that were predicted long ago by looking at polling data. Florida went for Trump easily. Texas went for Trump easily. He's very much ahead right now in the Electoral College votes because the big states that have come in the last couple of hours have been ones where he was expected to win. Similarly, we see Harris demonstrating strong results in New York so far. And then also we're looking very closely at what we're calling swing states. Those are ones that have always been too close to call. And right now they continue to be too close to call.
I was going to say, tell me about some of those swing states, because I've heard an awful lot the last few days, last few weeks, I should say the last few months, about Georgia, about North Carolina, about Pennsylvania, about Michigan, Wisconsin. Yeah. There are a lot of different states, but all those states are of importance, and why exactly?
Well, it's a good question. First of all, these are states where you have almost an even number of Republican and Democratic registered voters. So that means very few voters left in the middle to make a difference one way or the other. But we also see these states having been closely divided in the last election cycle. So Georgia, for example, was narrowly won by Biden. Trump has spent a lot of time and energy improving his numbers there. Right now, it remains too close to call. Harris, of course, is concerned she needs to get Georgia in her column if she has any hope of winning the White House.
We're taking a look right now at some of those who are voting in Georgia. And Georgia's fascinating because when I see the Georgia map, there's an awful lot of red. Then there are a couple of really big cities, obviously Atlanta, but there's some big cities where it seems to be clusters of blue.
That's
it's a
right.
really dynamic state when you look at it that way, how different it is rural compared to urban.
Right, and that same dimension you're going to see in Pennsylvania and some of those swing states for sure. Rural voters have traditionally been aligning up with the Republican candidate for the last couple of cycles, and Trump has done very well with those voters. Democrats typically do well with union, big city, industry-focused workers and voters, and they continue to show strength there. Now, there's been a little bit of change over the last couple of election cycles, and that's the areas we're going to be closely watching as the voter results come in.
I was going to say, and like you said, even with Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, places like that, it's really radically different than what you could find 100 or 200 miles away.
Right, exactly. So you're going to see those big city areas that are traditional Democratic strongholds, but industries are changing. Pennsylvania has been very hard hit by inflation and economic pressures of late, and I think that's weighing on the minds of voters. Of course, Trump has not done himself any favor. His last rally did not go well. There were some insults to Pennsylvania voters that have seemed to make a difference, at least in some segment of the population, and we'll see if that ultimately tips the needle in Harris's favor.
We're seeing right now President Trump, and as you said, with Harris, and we spoke an hour ago in our digital hit at KITV.com. It's interesting because they're two such different candidates. As you said, Harris has had to sort of introduce herself sort of midstream, if you will, because President Joe Biden dropped out.
Right, that's right. So Harris was not known to many Americans. Certainly if you were in California, you got to know her as the Attorney General and a state-level politician. But for most national voters, they knew her as vice president. They knew perhaps of her work as the border czar, so to speak. But in terms of a presidential candidate, they're getting to know her for the first time, and with not much time. She took over in September, really as an earnest replacement for Joe Biden. And of course, it's been a very quick electoral season for her as she's introduced herself to both donors as well as voters to try to get them to support her in November.
Do you think that she had sort of the Biden thing in place, that they had that sort of infrastructure, if you will? Do you think that helped? It wasn't really from scratch. She was able to kind of move into the House, if you will.
Exactly. So, I mean, she inherited a lot of the campaign treasure chest. That really helped her. She did not have to start from scratch. She brought, of course, new momentum, particularly among voters who were growing increasingly concerned about Biden's advanced age. She also brings a youthful vote comparatively, and that we are seeing today showing up in election results. More women are showing up to vote and more younger voters, which she's going to need both of them to come out in large numbers if she has a chance of winning.
And the interesting thing we had talked about is, while we're used to sort of that traditional election night and going to sleep kind of knowing who your next mayor, who your next governor, who your next president is, probably not going to happen in this election, not with so many states that are really toss-ups.
That's right. We have so many early election votes coming in by mail that's going to take a while to count, especially for states where every single vote does need to be counted. They want to be extra sure. Of course, integrity of the process is going to be top of mind for everyone. We don't want to rush this process. We've got to be able to trust the results.
Your thoughts, at least with the early on numbers, is it kind of where you thought it would be? Are there any surprises, any states that maybe we didn't talk about or we didn't hear a lot of talk about that have sort of popped up?
Yeah, a little bit. So Virginia is just coming in. No, it's still too close to call. This is an area that traditionally has been Republican in the past. The last couple of cycles, though, there's such a strong federal work presence in Northern Virginia. It's tilted Democrat pretty early on in the night. We're not yet seeing enough results to call it one way or the other, but Trump is showing strength compared to where he was 4 years ago. So if Virginia's in play, that may mean Trump has a very good future ahead of him.
I was going to say, we're looking at the electoral map. It's kind of interesting also when you see this play out throughout the evening as some of the western states start to close. There's a big, huge middle of the country that's all red, and then it seems like the corners of the country are blue. So
right.
it's pretty dynamic that way, and it seems to hold true now for the last few election cycles. It's really noticeable.
Right, and that's why you see a difference sometimes between the popular vote winner and the electoral college vote winner. The popular votes are around the coastal populations. Those typically lean Democratic. They're pretty strong and predictable voter bases for Democrats. Republicans do very well in Middle America, where it's more rural and traditionally smaller communities. So that's why you may see Harris winning popular, but Donald Trump brought back to the White House.
I was going to say, we've seen that the last couple of election cycles,
right,
where it really is a numbers game, and just because you win the popular vote does not necessarily mean you're going to win and be the next president of the United States.
Exactly. Yes.
If you don't mind, will you stay with us throughout the rest of the evening?
I'd love to.
We'll
Thank
continue
you.
to pick Dr. Walsh's brain to make sure that we're getting all of the information. And here's what we've got planned over the coming hours, for the rest of the night, indeed, on Island News. We've got national coverage, that's ABC News, all the way up until our Island News at 6 o'clock tonight. Then we're going to have another half hour of coverage. That's going to be starting at 6:30. Dr. Walsh and I will be rejoining you at 5:30 with another digital update. And as always, you can check out the very latest results online anytime at KITV.com, and we will see you back online in a little less than an hour. Doctor, thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
All right, see you in a bit.